Americans. So, a man has been arrested outside a Las Vegas casino after claiming that he had a grenade in his ass. Now, normally that would just count as weird news and you'd pass it on, but I have questions. I have a bunch of questions, although there is one that is particularly quite interesting for me. Considering that he has a grenade in his butt and the grenade, for it not to go off, it kind of needs a... Can you say that for him to continue surviving, he'd have to not have weak pullout game? He'd have to have strong pullout game from the get-go? That's what I'm thinking, That's how I look at it. Because the other question that I'd have asked, which is a lot more cornier than that, is, can we officially say that he's a bomb?
Get ready for the battle of the sexes.
Or maybe he's gay and his boyfriend thinks that his ass is the bomb. That's how I'm thinking about it. Because if this guy was known to be gay, then this joke would have worked so well. Because, his ass is the bomb, if he hits it, shit might just blow up, if he decides to pull out too quick. This can be used so well if this man is gay. But anyways, the story isn't that he's gay. It's just that it was reported that, he is looking at one count of making threats of transmitting false information pertaining to an act of terrorism in the event on Friday morning, February the 3rd. After police officers made contact with him, he allegedly, quote-unquote, was saying random things and talking about Joe Rogan and his ex-wife. At one point, he stated to an officer that he had a grenade in his ass and he wanted to fart. End quote. Now, Gower allegedly proceeded to make threats notifying officers that he was Joe Rogan 2.0. Okay, Joe Rogan shit aside, this man made a threat that he had a grenade up his ass. Is it that he made a threat that he had a grenade up his ass, or was he saying that, his ass is the bomb? It's very easy to mistake that because it's a lot easier to say that. Yo, I'm really good at what I do. My ass is the bomb. My shit is mad fire. My shit would explode the moment it's put on the internet. That shit can be misconstrued to make it look as though this man was talking about having an explosive device up his butt cheeks, and it was possibly mixed with shit. Any person who would use the court context of English on saying this and all of a sudden be arraigned in front of a judge and be like, Your Honor, he mentioned how he was going to go explosive if he was allowed to go onto the internet. And apparently we hear that there is a slot machine known as the internet, also the Internet of Things. We have also heard that apparently he was saying that his ass was the bomb. And as per the report of my officers, I have immediately gone to ask him, and he was talking about how, he might have an explosive device. And we believe that it was a terrorist threat. But we went and we checked. We had somebody check him quite diligently, and we found no traces of the alleged device, meaning that he was not, in fact, carrying any explosive device within him, or that he was, in some way, an explosive device himself. The confidence that this man had to go out there and make noise and claim that he was the shit, claim that he was the bomb, and declare that he was Joe Rogan 2.0, instead of it being turned into something like public disturbance or disturbing the peace or some shit, this guy might end up being sentenced all because, he was being confident. And these guys mistook it to actually mean that he has some sort of a grenade up his ass, which would make me kind of ask, how exactly do they think that he'd have fitted a grenade up there? Or at least back there. Although then again, if I were to know the answer to that, then I'd be pretty good at biology, which I'm not. What I am good at is this podcast, which I should definitely have started by saying, welcome to Breaktime on Westside, your number one breaktime podcast, coming to you from Nairobi, Kenya. The man on the mic is a man who sees double the ass in assassination. He's a man who used to think that bukkake was a Japanese form of martial arts. It is none other than your tall, dark, and mildly handsome man, Sir Denver B. The show is Battle of the Sexes, our weekly love, sex, and relationships show, where I get to talk about a bunch of things that relate to guys fucking and women fucking and being in relationships And at some point, somebody disagrees. At some point, I will come through the conclusion. And at some point, when you listen to it, you might feel like you want to disagree or you openly disagree. And you can hit me up if you do disagree. We can hash this out as two people or even more. And you can hit me up on IG at Breaktime on Westside is the handle to hit me up on. The DMs are always open on IG. On Facebook, it is also at Breaktime on Westside. That is the Facebook page. And on Twitter, you can slide into my personal DMs, which is at Bagaka the D. Hit me up. Let's do a couple of rounds. Debate with me on why you feel like what I'm saying is absolute BS. And if there is something that you'd want me to talk about on the podcast, then I would love to do that. And same exact channels, hit me up on those ones. And I would be glad, I would be very, very glad to come on and actually discuss a lot of the different things that you might have an issue with. Now, first of all, this is the final episode of the season. And for those of you all that didn't know when the season began or, when the previous season ended on episode 96 of Battle of the Sexes, marked by a video on YouTube, which you should even go and check out. I'll even leave the link down in the description. But it has been one continuous season since episode 97, and to be very honest, like last time I spoke about how I was just going to continue, but this time I honestly don't even know. I don't know if I'm gonna do an episode of Battle of the Sexes next week. I don't know if I'm gonna do minisodes. I don't know if it's fan of a fan. Honestly, I don't know. I haven't planned for that shit, so we'll just see what happens next week. But honestly, I'm looking forward to seeing what happens because it's still in a bit of a decider right now. And maybe I might have an answer for you guys by Tweet Street or not, but we'll definitely see how that goes from there. Now, that said, we need to move on to our main topic of today. But before we do that, we need to talk about the Super Bowl for a little bit. The Super Bowl for the rest of us in the world is probably an opportunity to go and check out some of the best ads from some of the biggest companies in the world. Like, at least that is, for guys that are into marketing and advertising and just entertainment from like a media space. And, there's lots of other interesting things. Plus, people actually do have their own sort of like watch parties. Now, Drake had one of which he brought Future, and apparently Ciara and Russell Wilson were there and they got pissed off and they left. But that's besides the point. Now, the Game decided to have his own watch party at his place, and he had this sort of private party styled event that he was trying to do, of which he sent an invite to people. He was expecting it to be private, but it ended up leaking to TMZ, of which when I look at the message itself, it is long as hell, and it was a very interesting invite. And I'm even going to read for you the contents of it just so that you can kind of see where I'm at with this whole thing of it being interesting. So it says, and I quote, "The Game's first annual Super Bowl watch party sponsored by Stash House. Invite only, do not forward. Food will be provided and there will be an open bar with a bartender. It's going to happen on Sunday, the February the 13th of 2022, time 3 p.m. until you get annoying. And if that ass is late, don't expect no plate. Spend all day on your makeup if you want, and you're going to be eating foundation when you get there." All right. He said where, and he specified that it should be Uber only. There will be absolutely no parking for anyone. And if you want to drive, you can drive to CVS, blah, blah, parking lot, blah, blah. Again, it's our first Super Bowl watch party event, and we've kind of gotten the hang of this party life, so we strongly suggest to use Uber due to high volume of drunk drivers on these days and probable tow trouble. This is for your safety only. Really, we just don't want your car parked at our shit. For the third time, you must use Uber. Required, all women are asked to bring a quote-unquote just-in-case swimsuit. Also required, no men will be allowed entry unless personally invited, cleared by Game, have paid for entry, and they are equipped with 1 bottle of Class A or Class Azul and 1 bottle of 1942. There will be no exceptions. Save your cheap-ass bottles for your auntie retirement party. We are begging you, aka do not attempt to even bring that weak ass bitch with you. You know, the one with the weird energy that's always ready to go before you cause nobody fucks with her. Yes, her. Leave her ugly soul having ass at home. They tend to suck the energy out of the party, and we don't want her to feel out of place or cause you to leave early because you feel bad and are forced to be a good friend. Hashtag we petty. Alright, I'll probably even edit out a bunch of the things from the entire thing that I read, just for the sake of time, because I've noticed that I have eaten up quite a bit of time. Now, when you kind of look at this entire, scenario of like this private party, first of all, why the hell is it that supposedly all women are asked to bring a quote-unquote just-in-case swimsuit? Like, it doesn't make sense to me. Like, just tell them, you know what, come in a swimsuit because it's probably going to be a pool party. But why say bring a just-in-case swimsuit? For some reason, he could have just skipped all of that and asked for naked babes. Although at the same time, he's trying to make this almost seem like one of his rap videos, because this almost feels like a rap video setup in some way. Because it's usually then why you only ask for a certain kind of woman and have very few guys and have so many babes around and like have only like one particular kind of alcohol. Because this doesn't sound realistic as hell. Maybe for LA people, but it doesn't sound realistic as hell. And it seems like absolute BS. Like, it feels as though this party might actually be shit. Like, in my very humble opinion, I feel like it might be shit. Then there's this whole thing about, guys will not be allowed unless they are cleared by game. No, personally invited, cleared by game, have paid for entry and equipped with one bottle of either one of these bloody drinks. Okay, like, I can get the whole paying to check in. Like, guys have done this shit for eons, and it's like we always prefer having more babes in a party than guys, blah blah blah. Like, I can get it. Guys will have to pay. But being personally invited, being cleared by game, having paid as the third thing, and carrying the bottle, you know what? Screw that shit. I'd rather go to a bar and pick up a babe right after the matches and everything. Like, go, chill, watch the Super Bowl from a public place, or even at home with a couple of my homies and hit up a babe afterwards. That's what I'd probably do, because this is just too much work. Like, he could have teamed up with a couple of guys to all go split like 10 G's, 10 G's, 10 G's. Like, they all give him like 10 G's. He goes, gets like 5 guys, makes it an invite only for a couple of his homies, asks for these guys to bring a couple of drinks. He can handle food. And from the 10 G's, he'll have gotten from like 4 or 5 of his close friends that they're doing the party with, he goes and he pays a bunch of babes. Like, Dan Bilzerian's been doing that shit for eons, and he has some of the wildest parties ever. So, like, he could have solved most of this shit by actually just getting rid of half of all of this, only inviting a couple of people, and then paying for a bunch of babes to be there. Like, simple as that. He can do that, then cut like 3/4 of the bullshit, and he'll have an amazing party that he can end up talking about for days to come. Like, do that 2-3 years in a row, then have people pay for shit instead of complicating everything for yourself. But anyways, that said, we should move it on. And over the weekend, I was actually just, scrolling through the internet, and I stumbled on an article by The Standard which was titled Generation Z Dating You for What You Have, Not Who You Are. Now, I ended up reading the entire article, and I found it to be particularly interesting because it was about this journalist who had sort of looked at how Generation Z, the much younger millennials, were kind of looking at relationships very differently. Our approach to dating, our approach to relationships was very different from how some of the older people were doing it. So what she decided to do was she decided to have a conversation with a couple of young people with one main question in mind, which was, are you ready to settle down? And that sort of premise, that topic, is the one that kind of rocked the entire thing. So she had 2 women and 2 guys, and both guys were fairly older. So one guy was an engineer, the other guy was a psychologist, and with the babes there was one who was a video producer and another one who was a student in the university. So I'm gonna tell you exactly what they said, and I don't know, like, to a certain degree, I can say from a guy's perspective, they were kind of close, but they really didn't hit the mark as much, probably because they didn't want to say it for what it is. But I don't know, like, let me just say it now from where all of these people were kind of at. So the video producer, Vanessa, said, I do not think the youth make any logical decisions. Most of the young people I know are in relationships as a result of peer pressure to fit in the society by posting couple goals on social media. In the past, there were many healthy relationships and marriages where women were the breadwinners. Nowadays, when a woman is working and the man has no source of income, then there is no relationship. End quote. this was stuff that she said. All right. Now, let's move on to the student, third year student of mass communication. Her name is Clara. And she said, and I quote, "The man's sole responsibility is to provide for and protect the family. If he cannot provide for and take care of himself efficiently, then how will he take care of me? I had a rough childhood. I promise to work hard and make sure I have a comfortable adulthood. Will I have the life I have always wanted for myself if I choose to see a man who cannot provide for me? Life is what you make it." And mind you, this is someone who's like 23 years old. Like, she's a 23-year-old student. But anyways, she goes on to say, and I quote, "To me, dating is not a must. And if I am going to date someone, then it has to be someone who can give me the life I have always wanted. Otherwise, I am keen on making myself better, finishing school and building a career." Okay, so those are two shorties. They've given fairly interesting outlooks on this. Now, let's go on to what the guy said. So Peter, the engineer, geospatial engineer, around 26 years old, says, and I quote, "They already know that their relationships are not going to work. I must say that it is a perception that social media has created. As a result, very few believe in a happy ending. I was very recently shocked when a former classmate of mine posted up on Twitter and said, 'Make all mistakes in the world, but do not make the mistake of getting married.'" End quote. Alright, very interesting sentiments over there. But I also do kind of feel like he may have sort of missed the mark, but he might not be too far off. Now, Ken Aringo, the counseling psychologist and life coach, said, and I quote, "Our generation has worked hard to earn the money, own the cars, acquire the houses, and look the part, style and fashion, but we have failed miserably in molding a healthy family unit for our youth. One more thing. The one thing that is in short or in no supply for most youth is commitment and a long-term approach to doing anything." End quote. Alright, now I found all of these comments and outlooks to be particularly interesting. But actually, I think I'll even start with what the psychologist said, because I feel like that one had the most impact. Because when you kind of look at how a lot of people are talking about, commitment is a problem these days, or relationships are a scam, the psychologist, the life coach, went ahead and blamed the previous generations for not showing us how to be in good relationships. And there is actually huge merit for it, because when you look at the previous generations, like the past 2-3 generations have had the highest levels of divorce than any other time in the world, in my opinion. Like, it's not factually verified, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was the case, even if it was factually verified. Yes, the number of divorces have declined nowadays, but it's mostly because there's fewer and fewer people that are actually going ahead and getting married. So you can kind of see that, yes, they possibly could be to blame, and because we've grown up and we've seen people ending relationships left, right, and center, and people not seeing themselves going that long, maybe we stopped valuing relationships in general. And that might be true. That might actually be true. But in the interest of not making this podcast 12 hours long, because I feel like I could talk about that particular bit that he said for like an entire day, and also considering that we're the same generation that usually talk about breaking generational curses and shit, I'm going to disregard that statement and just leave it aside, and I'm going to move on to what it is that the others said. Because there was something that I heard in a lot of what Vanessa was talking about, and a lot of what Peter was talking about, with the whole idea of the quote-unquote genuine relationship. So when I hear this, it's kind of the same way I felt when I heard genuine friendship. Because in one way or another, it makes it sound as though just because we want something now, people didn't want things back then, or in a genuine friendship you don't want something, which I think is utter bullshit. Like, if you listen to some of the older relationship talk that I have featured on this podcast, more so if you listen to the episode that I did, I think it was either early 2020 or all the way back in 2019, which had the clip from the Expeditiously podcast with T.I., where he was talking with his wife, and the wife straight up said that she was taught by her aunt to go and chase after security and not love. Like, does it mean that her relationship with him wasn't genuine? Like, that's sort of like the question that I usually have, because back in the day, people did have relationships, and thinking that a genuine relationship is all about love is probably one of the most misguided things that our media for the past, I think, 20, maybe 30 years has been feeding us. And the truth of it is, a good relationship isn't based off of love. Like, I feel like people looked for, I think the term that they probably would have wanted to use instead of, say, genuine is character, integrity, and maybe sustainability. Like, the idea that you are looking for someone who was of character, someone who's good, like that was probably the best way to say genuine, as opposed to what it is right now, where people are looking for, say, financial freedom, not just stability. People are looking at, genetics and shit. Like, people are looking at clout. Like, you can clearly see that they're more superficial rather than integral. And I feel like that's probably where a good chunk of the disconnect came in, because people feel like those were genuine relationships, yet people were still looking for something in someone else. And it's just that it was mutually beneficial, or the benefits were not materialistic or superficial in that sense of the word. Now, that said, I can boil down what it is that the three other interviewees, minus a psychologist, because I think that's what they're called, had said in terms of what it is that's preventing them from settling down, to be three main things. All right. So there's peer pressure, there's the idea of trust, and there's the expectations. Now, peer pressure is the one that I found to be particularly interesting. The whole dating for social media, dating because other people are dating, or dating because you want to look good out there. Of which, the moment I had that in my head, the first thing that clicked is either somebody skipped a stage in high school, or they didn't grow out of that stage as they were growing up. Because it was in high school where people were like, oh, I'm dating somebody just because we're dating. Or you're trying to date the hottest girl in class because she's the hottest girl in class, or some shit. Or something similar to that. Like, you knew that it's not like the relationship is particularly genuine, but a lot of people are dating just because they want to look good in relationships. And being in a relationship in high school was like a pretty interesting thing, and it was a nice thing. But when you're grown, when you're a full grown adult, like, that's a very superficial reason. Like, the older you grow, and I think that's something that most of us will start feeling like when we start taking adulthood seriously, like when we start becoming serious adults and we don't just, enjoy the freedom of, oh, now I'm permitted to do just about anything. Like, once we get to that level, now that's when we start valuing our relationships a lot more. So you don't just get into a relationship with someone, you get into a relationship with someone after, careful thought, after you've actually vetted them in one way or another, and you know why it is that you'd want to date them. So when I sort of read the whole peer pressure thing, it sounded a bit bullshit, but I know there are some people that still do that, and it's unfortunate that they haven't grown out of that stage. Then there's the idea of trust. Now, if I work hard and I'm providing for my shorty, I'm not married to her, but we're living together, and then I fall under hard times, she can very easily up and leave. It's a very painful thing to a lot of guys, but it's something that I see and I have watched experience even close to me. Like, I have seen a babe start cheating on a guy that she was dating when the guy was properly down and almost out. And she ended up leaving him for someone else, and this guy was still down and out. So at what point in time can you say that, oh, I will be down to go and settle down with just any babe, if that's such a problem? And I'm not gonna lie, it's part of the reason why a lot of guys and a lot of babes aren't getting into relationships. The idea of trust, the idea that this other person will cheat on me, Nairobi is full of people who cheat a lot, blah blah blah, that is hindering quite a lot of people from settling down and looking for a partner to try and have a long-term relationship with. But the unfortunate side of that is, and I kind of have to use this as a justification, you can't really decide for someone whether they're going to cheat or not. You're just going to have to hope that they don't. And essentially, that's kind of what love is, knowing that someone can do that kind of harm and, put you through that kind of pain, but trusting them regardless, hoping that they won't do it. And it's unfortunate that in today's day and age, it's a lot harder to trust because the cheating stories are a lot more. Infidelity seems like it's almost a normalized thing. And the idea of settling with somebody with the thought of that becomes even harder. But at the end of the day, it's still a question of, do you trust this individual to not cheat on you, and are you really willing to take the risk? Which I feel like there's a lot of people that could say yes on both, but they're just afraid of the character development, which I feel like sometimes people even end up even better out of it than even before they went through it. But that said, I feel like the biggest problem, especially for us guys, because I speak from a guy's standpoint, is the expectations. Like the fact that you are expected to provide for a family. Like, I know so many guys that would love to be in a relationship. I know so many guys that are open about the idea of going in and dating and being with somebody, that would love the idea of being in a relationship, but they don't feel like they're worthy simply because they do not make a certain amount, or they're not financially stable, and because they can clearly see that the babes that they want, the women that they're probably chasing after, the babes that they're trying to talk to, are like, no, I want a man who can give me stability. I want a man that can pay for this, can pay for that, can take me on trips, can handle dates. Like they talk about the kind of luxury life that they want, and these guys are like, in their heads, they know that they can't provide that. And because they know that the woman of today, a lot of the women of today have those expectations and will almost just as easily leave when you're unable to provide, they stray away from the idea of it. Like Clara was a very, very simple example of a large majority of women who exist right now. Because you could talk about stability back in the day, but nowadays it's literally financial freedom. They don't ever want to worry about bills and shit. They want to make sure that when they're with you, you take care of everything and they can keep whatever money they have. But at the end of the day, that expectation to be resourceful, to provide, is what's hindering a lot of the younger people right now, especially in this day and age where jobs are harder to come by. Making a good sustainable level of income from at least one job is even harder to get, and a large majority of people are pretty much just trying to survive and give themselves a chance to, get themselves on their own 2 feet. Like, it's not very easy to get that out of the largest majority of us. Like, even statistically from Kenya, like, I think there's only about 3% of Kenyans that actually make that upper six figure level where they can even manage to put aside like 100k for anything. So in and of itself, like, that is a pipe dream for a lot of babes, and something that hinders a lot of guys from even shooting their shot. But that said, let me just conclude by saying this. When I started this season, like 2-3 episodes in, I sort of felt like I wanted to give it a theme. And the main theme that I gave Battle of the Sexes Season 9 was actually myths. I wanted to bust all the myths that relate to guys, that relate to relationships, just so that I can clear the air and, debunk some of the beliefs and, justify why some exist and why some shouldn't even be there, and why some might even hold a little bit of water. And from a guy's point of view, if you were to bring forward the question of why is it that guys aren't settling down as much nowadays, like, a lot of people would probably come out to say, oh, we're too busy hoeing around, or oh, we prefer to just get the kid, which, yes, it is true for quite a number of us, but I feel like the biggest reason is just the expectations. The expectation that you're supposedly supposed to be making more than the person that you graduated school with who's of the opposite gender. The expectation that you should be able to provide for yourself at this point in time, and possibly even provide for someone else, yet you probably have the same problem in terms of access to opportunities as the person that's right next to you. Hell, even the expectation that after being rejected by all of these people, and after being told, what, I don't like you, blah blah blah, you get your money up, and then you're still expected to ignore all of these babes that now suddenly want you. And in your prime time, like when you've just hit your prime in terms of babes wanting you, the money's coming in good, you ignore all of them, you stick to one babe, you get married, and you suddenly settle down. Like, all of those expectations are usually slapped onto us, and I find them to be particularly weird, and I find them to be very, very heartless and inhumane sometimes. But all in all, those are the expectations that exist in the world today. And while we might not subscribe to all of them, some of us do subscribe to most of them. And I feel like a majority of us wouldn't mind settling down, even right now while we're in our 20s. But it's just that some of the things that y'all want, some of the things that y'all are saying that you want from your men, is things that might have been possible 30, 40 years back by a 20-year-old. But right now, that shit's nearly impossible. But anyways, maybe I might be wrong about this. Maybe my expectations or my idea of expectations is all wrong. So I want your thoughts on this. The DMs are open on IG, it is at Breaktime on Westside. On Facebook, it is also at Breaktime on Westside. And on Twitter, you can slide into my personal DMs, which is at Bagaka the D. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end. And if you are listening through Castbox, feel free to drop your thoughts and comments below, and I will attend to them accordingly. And I will catch you guys on the next break.